Hello, and welcome back to Learning with Lee. In today's episode, we're going to examine polymorphism and virtual functions. And to do this, we're going to examine a very simple question with a somewhat difficult answer. And that question is that if I do this, where I have this item pointer I equals new weapon, and then I call item i's getName function, which for now ends up calling into item here with this version of getName, what then happens if in weapon, I then create another function called getName in here, and since it of course doesn't have access to name within there, for now let's just have it return weapon. You might think, well, clearly that's an error because you have a function with the same, or a method with the same name as another method that you have. Except that that isn't actually necessarily a problem. And as we will see if I then build this, you'll see that it doesn't have any build errors. Now the question then is, what happens when I run it? Which one of those two will it call? Will it call the one in item, or will it call the one in weapon? And the answer is that we'll call the one in item. As you might notice down here, unknown, which is what I have up here, for its default name, which is what's getting stored here, as opposed to weapon. So that's how it's doing that. But then if I change this one to a weapon pointer, you might notice then that rather than it returning unknown, it now returns weapon. And that happens to be one of the problems that virtual methods, virtual functions are designed to solve. And what a virtual function, which is sort of how the term method originally originated, was that it was used specifically for virtual functions. It is since, in general, because of its common usage in Java, C#, etc., has expanded to mean pretty much anything that used to be considered a function is now also considered a method, and the two of them are pretty much identical in terms of how they are actually used when people speak about it, as opposed to trying to get all technical and saying that methods are strictly virtual functions. That version of the definition is very rarely used, but some people might use that. So the question then is that if I wanted to access weapons specific version of getName while treating it as an item, so as I don't have to care what type I is so long as it's a child of item, how do I make certain that that happens? And that's done using the virtual keyword. And the first thing you have to do is you have to specify that something in weapon, like getName down here, has the ability to actually override or be used in place of the version that's an I. I've used the term override a bit loosely throughout some of this series. However, it specifically is used with regards to virtual functions, virtual methods, in terms of saying that something like this, in case I mark it as virtual, that it is going to end up going over and being used in place of something in item in the event that I do something along these lines here, so that this one would then use weapons as opposed to items. However, I have to mark the one that's in item also as virtual. So I need to do it for both the children classes as well as also the parent class. So as that I can specify that getName all the way up and down is going to be a virtual function or virtual method. So what we're going to deal with here then is that if I do this, now we should actually see weapon get output as opposed to unknown. As you can see down here, that is correct. And that is because of what is known as polymorphism. And that's the ability to retain how one class works, such as a child class, while at the same time obfuscating it behind something such as parent class. So in case right now, I could be armor, it could be a weapon, so it allows for those to end up having distinct functionality without whatever's using it to have to know the specific type of this. And it's a bit weird, I know, for now, and in the next episode we're actually going to cover how it's implemented by what is known as the vtable. However, for now it's more to focus on what is the major point of virtual. And the point of virtual is that right now, it doesn't matter whether I refer to this as an item or a weapon, it is going to use the weapon-specific version of getName. And in the event that I don't have this overrided within here, and I just build this and run it, then it's going to use the item version of it because of the fact that since it doesn't have that custom version in here, it's going to then pop up to its parent to see if it has a valid version of getName. And by valid version of getName, I mean that it has some definition for it. In case, for example, in here I just had declared it without ever actually having defined it, then I would have an error that I would have to end up having it be used somewhere. I would have to have it defined somewhere so as I could actually use it. But for now, it just would hop into items and use that one. Whereas in case I override it in here, it's going to use this one. Whereas in case, say then if we open up our little stuff over here and we head down to like weapon melee or weapon ranged, I could override it in one of those and not in weapon. So that, let's say that down in here, I instead had something along the lines of copy this guy from here into here. Now a weapon melee would end up actually returning this, but a weapon would return unknown. Because of the fact that weapon no longer has that in there, it would have to go to its parent in order to find that. So this one here, even though weapon doesn't have it, is virtual because weapon's parent item has it as virtual. Weapon melee also has the ability to do that. All that matters is that it's virtual in one of your ancestors. It doesn't have to be your direct ancestor. It can be an ancestor really any number back, so long as it happens to be defined as virtual at some point in there. And to really get used to this and show yourself this is the case, I would like you to end up spending some time tonight or tomorrow and basically implement the same stuff in Armor. So as in its header class, you end up having this virtual function for getName, and let's just add it back into here real quick. So that now we have this back. So let's just have getName also then in Armor have that be virtual. And then in here, create a new armor. You're going to have to, of course, update your includes up here. And then see that even though it can be an item, you can basically have item I point to either a weapon. Basically, I would say do item I equals new weapon, do something like this, delete it, then assign it to an armor, and then have it output. And you can see that it ends up getting the specific version for weapon and for armor, even though the pointer that you're using is the same and happens to be related to their parent type. Because that is the key thing to understand, is that you're able to get this unique functionality from these different classes while having a reference only to their parent class. So, thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.